trying to perform the CRUD operations is Hibernate as a topic. If you just have a program to write in Hibernate, one thing you will understand is the code is simple. Only thing is the environment or the setup is something where you will have to spend some additional time on. Correct? So I asked you to go back and practice a couple of tables. Have you tried it? Yes. So great. In today's session, what I want to start off with is I want to start off with something called as one-to-many or one-to-one mapping. In Hibernate, we have something called as one-to-one mapping. So before I actually get into one-to-one mapping, I will want to write one program for a new table. So let us assume maybe I am going to start off with a new table here where I will go to my workbench. I will log in to the workbench and I'll probably say I want to create a new table. We were using September JE. This was the database that we were using, right? Yes. So in this September JE, maybe I want to create a new table. I'll call this a table as maybe student table. I'll call this table as student table. And in this student table, I will say I have SID, which is an integer, which is a primary key and not null. Correct? Primary key and not null. See, if you understand this correctly, tell me one thing that we were trying to do is, whenever I wrote the code previously also, it was a primary key, that's all. Yes or no? I did not make this auto-generated value last time. Yes. But tell me, whenever you are writing IDs, it is preferred to make it auto-generated. Will you agree with me? It is preferred to make it as auto-generated values. So in order to make sure I have an auto-generated value, what I will do is I will also select it as auto-increment. I will select it as auto-increment so that it will be auto-generated and it will increment on its own. Right? All right. So SID is over. What is the next thing? I will maybe say I have a column called as the name column, which is a varchar. Then I will maybe say I want email and also maybe address or email, mobile number I will say. So this is the data that I have, mobile number, maybe I will keep it as integer for my reference. So this is the table which I have. Only difference is I have an auto-generated data. I have an auto-generated data. Previously I did not have an auto-generated data. So let me apply this. I'll apply it and I'll try to finish it. So now if I get into my Eclipse, so in Eclipse what I want to do is maybe I want to start off with a new program. I want to start off with a new program where I want to make sure I am trying to write a program for dealing with the student table. I want to write a program to make sure I deal with the student table. So tell me, in order to do it, maybe I'll have to create a new project. So I'll right click, I will say I need a new Maven project is what we are using. So in the Maven project, I will say create a simple project, skip the architecture type. Then group ID, I will say com.hib. Artifact ID, I will say it as student HIB, and I will say it as jar packaging. I will finish it. So you can see here the name of the project is a student HIB. So I have a project created here called as the student HIB. I will open the pom.xml. You can see in the pom.xml I do not have any information. So in this I am going to make sure I want some dependencies. So what are the dependencies that I need? I need a Hibernate core and a Hibernate core and MySQL dependency. So I will say maven repository.com. Here I will search for MySQL connector. I am going to search for it. I will have a MySQL connector for Java. I will select it. Version 8.0.32 I will select. Whatever is the code for Maven, I just copy this. I will come back here. I will paste it for MySQL dependency. Akhil, MySQL dependency is over. What is the next dependency? Hibernate core. So I will search for a Hibernate core dependency. I will have a Hibernate core dependency. I told you any version you can use, but don't use the latest version because it will still be in a fixing stage. So maybe I will use 6.6.0. I'll just copy this. I will come back. I will paste the Hibernate core dependency also. I'll now right click on my project. I will go to Maven. I will say update project student HIB. I want to update. Right, sir, dependencies you have added. What is the next thing that I need? Maybe I need the configuration file. You remember the Hibernate configuration.xml file. So again, I told you, you can write any name. So where should I be creating that file? SRC main resources is where I will be creating it. So SRC main resources, I will create a new other type of file which is called as an XML file because it is a .xml extension. I will call it as student. I'll call it as student. Tell me, is there a problem if I call it as student? No problem, sir. Only thing is you need to mention the file name. You need to mention the file name. I'll mention the file name. So I'll go to my previous project. I guess it is not there here. Anyways, I'll go to the internet and bring the code in case if it is not available. Maybe I will say here as Hibernate mapping in Java, not this. So hibernate.cfg.xml. So I will use some code from the internet tutorials point. I'll go get it from here. So I'll just copy the entire file. I'll just place it. I'll paste it here. Alright, so you can see I'm trying to write here as okay, what is this HBM2DDL? I will talk about this. I will explain you what is this HBM2DDL. But for now, I will keep it commented, which means I will not use it. So when I use it, I will explain you what it is. Right? Anyways, MySQL 8 dialect, what is the database name? SCPT JEE, correct? SCPT JEE, correct. Okay, root password, I will write it as root com.mysql.cj.jdbc.driver. So I will cut this, I will put it on the top. So there is one more or two more things that I was using. What is that I was also using? I was using show SQL, right? So show SQL. So property name show SQL as true, format SQL as true. Both of them also I will copy, I will paste it here. Right. So one thing apart from this is mapping resource. I am not having a mapping resource, rather I will have a mapping class. But whatever the mapping class I have, I will not mention about the mapping class here. While I am getting the configuration and setting up the session factory, there I will talk about the mapping class. How will I talk about the mapping class there? By using a method called as add annotated class, right? Add annotated class. So we will try to do that there. So anyways, now this is what I have written. I will create a class called as the student class. So I'll right click on my project. I will tell it as a new class. The package is maybe com.hib.entity. entity, right? com.hib.entity. I will call this as student. All right. So I will now tell it here as a finish. So I don't want a super student constructor anyways, it will be there. Okay sir, what is the student entity class, sir? What is the student entity class going to do? It has to be mapped to the student table. Will you agree with me? Tell me, how will I map it to the student table? First and foremost thing, if it has to map, it should be called as an entity class. So I will say at the rate entity. I'll say it as entity. I'll import the entity. Then I will say it as at the rate table. I will import the table from Jakarta persistence table. Okay, I will have to say table name to which it is mapped. What is the name of the table? I guess I have created it as a student. Whatever is the name, I'll just copy. I will paste it here. So I have a table called as the student table. Okay, inside the student table, what are the fields that I have? I have SID, name, email, mobile. So I will say integer type SID, string type name, string type email, and int type mobile. So what I'll do is I'll declare all of these as private members. Once I've declared them all as private, I will have to bring in setters and getters for all of them. So I will right click, I will say source generate getters and setters. I will select all. So getters and setters I am able to generate. Then I'll say, maybe I'll go on the top. Here I will say now I need a constructor. So right click, source, generate a constructor using the fields, all the fields, one constructor. Tell me, if I want to create a student object now, if I use this constructor whichever I have generated, don't you feel I have to pass the SID? I have to pass according to this constructor, but according to my program, do I need to pass the SID? Not needed, sir. Why? Because SID is an auto-incremented value. You need not pass it. So what I will do is I will create one more constructor without a SID. So you can see, right click, source, generate constructor using the fields. SID, I will generate it. See, just like how I have generated one constructor having all parameters, one constructor without ID parameter, in the same way, I will also need a 0 parameter constructor. Or in other words, I want a default constructor. But tell me, will my program give me a default constructor? Why? Because sir, already you have written one constructor. Your Java program will only give a default constructor if no constructor is written. Since you have already included a constructor, 0 parameter constructor you will not get. You have to create it. So I will right click and I will say here as source generate constructor using the fields, sorry, source generate constructor using the fields, deselect all, generate. So a 0 parameter constructor also you have put, right? Sir, everything is okay, but whatever the variables that you have declared, don't you feel these variables should be mapped to the columns in the table? Yes, I will start mapping the variables now. You can just have a look at it. SID is a variable which has to be mapped with a column. So I will say at the rate column name is equal to SID. You can see here in the column the name is SID. I will import the column annotation. Now in the same way I will just copy paste it for every column, and I will say here as name, email and mobile. Name, email and mobile. Yes, sir, you have written this much correct, but ID is a primary key. Sir, SID. In order to mention a primary key, we were writing one annotation. What was the annotation? The annotation was at the rate ID annotation. At the rate ID annotation. I will also have to import the ID annotation. Is this clear? Hello? So now I have created an entity class. Will you agree with me? Now the question is, whatever the entity class that I have created, is it exactly the same as that of the table that you have? Is it mapped exactly the same? If you ask me, I would say no. Why, sir? Sorry? See, very simple. Tell me, SID in your table, what is it? It is auto-generated primary key. Primary key I have mentioned by using ID. I have to tell it is an auto-generated value. Did I write it as an auto-generated value in your table? Yes, sir, I have written it there. Then don't you feel your Java program also should be aware that, boss, this is an auto-generated value? I hope you are able to understand this. In order to make it as an auto-generated value, I will have to write another annotation, and this annotation is also called as generated value annotation. I have an annotation called as generated value. You don't look into the bookman, it's not there. This annotation is not there, don't worry. Right? At the rate generated value. So why will I use at the rate generated value, sir? It is to mention saying, boss, this is a auto generated, or this value has to be generated. Who should generate it? The program. You have to generate it now. For this generated value, it will expect you to give some strategies, or the way in which generation has to take place. Is it an identity, which means should it be unique, or all of it is something that we will have to say. So for this generated value, I will say here as strategy. Strategy, and it has, I have to tell here what is the strategy. So I will say here as generation type. So you can see here generation type. There are different types of generations. First one is auto-generated value. So you can see indicates that the persistent provider should pick an appropriate strategy for the particular database. The auto-generation strategy may expect the database resource to exist, or it may attempt to create one. So it should create a new one is what it says. A vendor may provide documentation on how to create such resources in the event that it does not support schema. So I'll tell you what is it. So what will happen is when I have to talk about it. So I have to tell whether it is an auto incremented value or is it an identity. You can see here. It says whether it is an identity, indicates that the persistence provider must assign primary keys for the entity using a database identity column. So basically how your database has to record all of this. Tell me, when I say auto generated value, assume that I have a table now called as student. I have a table called as student. Sorry, is it not visible? So I have a table here called as the student table. In this I told SID has to be auto generated. Will you agree with me? So assume that SID is auto generated. If I enter one record, what will be the ID? The ID will be 1, sir. If I enter a second record, what will be the ID? Sir, the ID has to be 10. Will it be 10? No, sir, it is going to be 2. If I enter the third record, the ID should be 3. Will you agree with me? So who is it that is going to tell us what has to be the ID? Somebody should tell us, no? What should be the next ID? How will your database generate it now? So while I write this auto generation, generation type as auto, what is going to happen is my database would have created one sequence table. It will create one sequence table in which the previous number it is going to store. Such that what should be the next ID, it will go to the table, find it and then enter. I will show you when I execute this program, you will see that there will be one extra table that would have also created. I'll talk about it. So generation type, what is the generation type? I have told the generation type as auto. I hope you are able to understand this. Right? Okay, sir. Now I have a student class mapping exactly to the student table. I have a student class mapping exactly to the student table. Okay. Now I will create a main method. So I'll right click. I will say I want a new class. com.hib.main I will say, in which I will create a main method. So you can see here in the main method, see again I am trying to tell you here, if you want you can create one Hibernate manager. In the Hibernate manager you can do all of it, but I am not going to create it like a Hibernate manager and other file, but main method only everything I am going to do. Previously I told you can write it as Hibernate DAO, Hibernate DAO implementation, but I am writing it in the main method. You can place it wherever you want, it will still work fine. Right? Okay, sir, in the main method, what is that I want to do is, I want to take some data, insert it into the student table. Tell me, if I want to insert some data into the student table, what is the first thing that I need to do? I need to establish a session first, sir. Will you agree with me? Tell me what is the code that I will have to write in order to establish a session. Establish a session now. Session type session is equals to new configuration. So session type session is equals to new configuration dot configure. Tell me what will the dot configure method search for? It will search for hibernate.cfg.xml. Do I have hibernate.cfg.xml? I have student.xml. So I will say here, configuration file, you need to search for student.xml. Okay, new configuration, configure student.xml dot add annotated class. What is my annotated class? student dot class is the annotated class. I'll have to import the student from, okay, first is session. I will import it from org Hibernate session, and student also I have imported. So you can see here, okay sir, add student, add annotated class is over. What is the next thing? Dot, dot build session factory is something that I will have to say. Using the build session factory, I will say dot open session, right? If I write this much, I will be able to get a session. Will you agree with me? Sir, once I have a session, what is the next thing, sir? Now, whichever object you want to insert into the table, create that object. So, I will say student type S1 is equals to new student, and student constructor, I will use the second constructor which I had created. The first one was all parameters, second one was without the ID. I will create a student object without passing the student ID. Can I try doing it? So I will say, what is it going to accept then? It will accept the name. So I will say it as name. Email, I will write it as rahul@gmail.com, and mobile number, some mobile number I have written. Right? So student name, email and mobile number, I have created an object. What do I want to do with this object? Insert it into the table, sir. In order to insert it into the table, what is the lines of code that I need to write in Hibernate now? Sir, begin transaction, save, commit transaction. 3 lines, will you agree with me? Okay, how will I begin a transaction now? I will say session dot begin transaction. So I will say session dot begin transaction. Once if I say session dot begin transaction, the transaction has started. If you want, you can collect it. If you want, you can ignore it as it is. Now I will say session dot save S1, session dot save S1, or persist you can call. Okay. So either save or persist. Then I need to commit the transaction. So I will say session dot get transaction dot commit. Session dot get transaction dot commit. Get transaction will give me whichever is the transaction that has just begun. So now I will say here, for my understanding, system.out.println data inserted. I will write here as data inserted. Now I will just save the code. I will run my program. So once if I run the program, so you can see here there is some problem. You can see select next value as ID value from student sequence. Sir, what is this student sequence, sir? I told you it is going to create one sequence table to keep record of the next value. Tell me, did I create a student sequence table? But my program wants it now. Can you see? It wants a table called a sequence, student sequence. Are you able to see? It needs a table called a student sequence. But according to me, while I was writing, did I expect it will need a table? I did not expect it will need a table. Will you agree with me? Hello? Sir, in such a case, see, while you are writing a code, you may not expect such tables that your program may need. Will you agree with me? Don't you feel it would be better? In such cases, Hibernate has the control. Whichever table you want, you create. Don't you feel it would be better if Hibernate has the control? But whichever table you want, you create and use it. Are you able to understand this? Sir, how will I give a control for the Hibernate to create whichever table you want? For that, if I just have to show you, I commented one line of code, you remember? In the student.xml, I have commented this property. This property is called as the HBM2 DDL. Data definition language, Hibernate to data definition. I am trying to give control to my Hibernate. Boss, whenever you want, you create your own table. You are trying to store data, you wanted a table, that table is not there, you create. So which is the property that is going to help us do it? HBM2 DDL, HBM2 DDL. So I'll write it in the end so that there is no confusion. HBM2 DDL. And now tell me, I will go back to the database, I will go back to the tables. Tell me, in the tables, do I have any sequence, any table that I have created? I haven't created any table like that, sir. Now I will go back to my program, I will go back to the main method, and now I will rerun my code. Once I rerun the code, you can see it says data inserted. I am not interested in this. If I just go on the top, you can see it is saying, boss, alter email, something it has done. I have set it as varchar of 45, so it has altered it to varchar of 255 characters. I am interested to see this particular query. What is it? Create student sequence table. It is only created on its own. Which means, sir, in the, if I go to the database, will there be any table like this called as the student sequence table with the next value variable? You can see there is a column called as next value. If I go to the database, if I refresh, you can see, what is it, September, you can see I have a student table. In student table, data is inserted. I am not interested in this, I am interested in student sequence. If I go to the student sequence, it is showing me the next value. See, I don't know how it calculates, but when I insert the next value, it will insert it as the next value, and the next value it is going to store it as 101. So I am not sure how the calculation takes place. But, you can see now, I will try to insert one more student's details. So I will rerun my program, or before that I will have to change the details here. So I will say Sachin at gmail.com and the number 101010. Now I will just save it, run my code. So you can see it again says data inserted, and in case if I go to the database, if I go to the student table, Sachin's record is inserted, but if I go to the sequence, you can see the next value is 10. So it makes some calculations on its own, but this is how it is going to help us generate a value on its own. I hope you are able to understand this auto generation. Yes. So tell me, whenever you have some data to be auto generated in your database, how will you write it in your Hibernate? Sir, I will use an annotation called as generation type, generated value, generated value, and I will have to say a strategy for generation as generation type, and in that you have identity, auto, etc. I will be using auto. I hope you are able to understand this. Any confusion? So generated a type. I hope you have understood this. So though the entire code is almost the same, there is one new thing that you have learned here. which is nothing but @generated value annotation. @generated value annotation. I hope it is clear. Any confusion now? So, can I go ahead then? Hello? Now, what I want to do is, I want to write a Hibernate program to deal with two different tables. I am going to say I will have one table. I am going to say I will have one table which I will call it as student table, and also one more table I will have which I will call it as student underscore details table. So I am going to say I have a student table and I am going to have one more table called as the student details table. Sir, what is there inside the student table? You anyways already know. I am going to have SID, name, email and mobile. This is what I have inside the student table. In the same way, in student details table, I will have SDID, student detail ID. Then I will say I have address by name, by asking the user as what city the user belongs to, and maybe I'll write it as a area, city and pin code. Some information, some random information. In this way, two different tables I am going to expect. I am going to expect two different tables. So what is the first table? SDID, area, city and pin code. Then student table with all the student details. Now what I want to do is, whenever I try to insert some data into the student, assume that I want to insert a record inside the student table where I will say the ID is 3, name I will write it as Virat, email something vk@gmail.com, and mobile number, some mobile number I will write. In this way, some details I want to insert. Whenever I want to insert these details related to the student, there also has to be some relevant details about the student details also, which has to be entered. There should be some relevant student details as well. For example, for Virat, I am going to say there is some address or details about Virat I want to store. So the record inside the student details will be SDID. SDID, and I will say area, I will write it as BTM, Bangalore, and 560076. In this way, I want to enter the records. I want to enter the records. Are you able to understand this? Sir, when I try to record or when I try to insert data like this, how will I keep track of data, sir? How will I keep track of students' details, sir? In order to understand this, maybe I will ask my Hibernate, listen, you have a provision to add one column. You have a provision to add one column. So this I will say it as SD is the column. So for this student, where is the student details present? That information will be there in SD. Tell me, where is the student details present? What is the ID? 1. So I will take this, I will put it here. I'll take this, I will put it here. So if you just have a look at it, there is a table in which I have one record. And what is happening to this one record? It is mapped to one more table. Will you agree with me? In the other table is this record mapped to one row or many rows? One row in one table is mapped to one more row in one more table. Will you agree with me? Yes or no? One row in one table is mapped to one more row in another table. Will you agree with me? This is only called as one-to-one mapping. This is only called as one-to-one mapping. So what do you mean by a one-to-one mapping? One-to-one mapping is nothing but one row in one table or one record in one table is mapped to one more or one record in another table. I hope you are able to understand this. What are the classic examples for all of this, sir? One individual will only have one Aadhaar card, one Aadhaar number throughout your life. Even if you want to change address you can change, but Aadhaar number will not change. One individual will have one license, one individual will have one PAN card, one individual will have one passport, right? So one record is mapped to one single record. If I just have to tell you, there is a Aadhaar database and a passport office database. If you try to map Aadhaar database with passport office database, one Aadhaar card will only have one passport details. If you are having second passport details, then there is a problem. I hope you are able to understand this, right? So how or where is one-to-one mapping important? We use it in everyday life. We use it in everyday life. So now what I want to do is I want to write a program like this, where I want to say one record in one table is mapped with one more record in another table. So before I talk about mapping it to another record in another table, don't you feel this student detail I need to have first of all? Do I have student detail? No, sir, I don't have. So what I will do is I will go to my Eclipse now. I will start creating this student detail class. Can we create the student detail class? Yes. So I will go to the entity package com.hib.entity. I will say I need a new class. What is the name of the class? Student detail. Okay. Sir, we have a student details class now. What do I want inside the student details class? What is student detail class now? It should be mapped to a table, which means this is an entity class now. Will you agree with me? This is an entity class. So I will say here as @entity. I will now import the entity from a package. After this I will say @table. Name of the table I need to write, sir. I will say student underscore details. I will import the table from Jakarta persistence table. Inside this, what are the details I need? SDID, area, city and pin code. Will you agree with me? So I will create integer type SDID. Okay. Then string type area. then string type city and int type pin code I will write. Okay sir, whatever I have written, all of this I will make it as private, copy them, paste them below. I am going to make it as private. Okay sir, private also we have made. What next? Now I will bring in setters, getters, constructors. If you want toString method also you can bring. I guess in the student I did not bring the toString method. If you wish you can do it, because the first example I was not anyways bringing the data, so I did not bring the toString method. If you wish to get it, you can also get the toString method. So now I will go to the student details. In the student details, I will now generate setters, getters, etc. So I'll say right click source, generate getters and setters, select all, generate, right click, source, generate constructor using the fields, all the fields, right click, source, generate constructor using the fields. I will remove SDID. Why? Because SDID I will make it as auto generated value. So then I will generate then a 0 parameter constructor also I want. Source, constructor using the fields, 0 fields, 0 parameter constructor. All this I have got. toString method wantedly I haven't included, because I will go to the student also. In student also toString method I will add it later, right? But for now this is what I have. This is what I have with respect to the student detail. But sir, whatever the rows, whatever the variables you have to map it with the columns, sir. So in order to map it with the columns, SDID, it is an integer, it is a primary key. So I will say it as an ID, then I will say column annotation name is equal to SDID. I will now import it. Okay. Then in the same way I will add it for every other column. Column annotation as area, column annotation as city, column annotation as pin code. Correct? What is the other thing? Sir, ID, SDID, whatever we have, it should be an auto-generated value. So tell me, how will I make SDID as auto-generated value? I will say generated value. Generated value strategy, I am going to say it as generation type dot auto. I will write it as generation type dot auto, which means it has to be a auto generated value. Sir, okay sir, now you have made it as an auto generated value. What next? Tell me, should I go to the database and create the table? Yes sir, I need to create the table, sir. Will you agree with me? But I will say I will not create. What did I write here? What is this I have written? Full control I have given to Hibernate. I will write the code. Any table you want, you should create. I hope you are able to understand this. I am only going to write the code. Tell me, in your JDBC, what was the problem that you were facing? Assume that I am a back-end developer, I am a Java developer. What was the problem that you were facing? Database also I should only create, sir. SQL query for creating, altering database also I should only write, sir. Yes or no? Your Hibernate, if it is an alternative for JDBC, you need to understand Hibernate would have overcome the drawbacks that you had in JDBC. In JDBC, as a Java developer, somebody who is totally concentrated on writing the Java code, why should he remember SQL queries? Are you able to understand this? That is the reason to overcome all your problems related to JDBC in your Hibernate. You need not write, or you need not go and create a table. Just because I have told HBM2 DDL as auto as update, it is only going to generate the table also. Not just your student detail table it will generate, it will also generate student detail underscore SEQ table. Why? It needs to keep track of the SDID sequence. Hello? So you can see I will not be creating any table, rather I will go to my program and I am going to say there is one-to-one mapping. See, look at this table arrangement and tell me, how do I want one-to-one mapping? Sir, one row in a student table should be mapped to one row in student detail. Will you agree with me? Yes or no? One row in student table should be mapped with one row in student detail. It is called as one-to-one unidirectional mapping. We have two things, see, one-to-one unidirectional, one-to-one bidirectional. So what is unidirectional, what is bidirectional, you will understand it. But before that, I want one row in one table should be mapped with another row in one more table. Which means, as a programmer, what are you thinking? Student table row should be mapped with student detail table row. That you are thinking. Don't you feel the same thing? You need to tell your program also. If you simply think, is it sufficient? You should tell your program also. For this, I will go to this class called as the student class. I will go to this class called as the student class. Can you tell me what do I want to do in the student class? Sir, very simple. Assuming this to be a table. Assuming this to be a table. Tell me what is that I am thinking? This table should be mapped to another table. Yes or no? But I told you, as a Hibernate as a developer who is writing Hibernate programs, you will not talk about table names. You will talk about entity classes representing those tables. If you remember, if I had to bring details about a student, how will I bring it? From student, where email, student ID or email equal to question mark, whatever you want you can write. Okay. So tell me, what should I do? Sir, first and foremost thing, I need to say this student table is mapped to student detail. Since I am not dealing with tables here, I am dealing with entity classes. So in the student class, I want to say, boss, this student class or the table is mapped to one more table. Which is that table? Student details. Does it have an entity class? Does it have an entity class? Yes, sir. So I will say private student details type, student details I will say. So I hope you are able to understand this. What is that I am saying? But this class should be mapped to this class or this class's table. How are you mapping it? One row in one table mapped to one row in another table. Will you agree with me? So for this, I will write one annotation called as @1-to-1 mapping. I will write it as @1-to-1. So I will say here as import one-to-one annotation. So you can see from JavaX persistence, I am going to import one-to-one annotation. Okay, sir, you have told it as one-to-one. What next? See, I will have to say, boss, whenever you are dealing with this details in the student details table, whether I am trying to fetch data or whether I am trying to insert data and all, you make sure student details also you bring every data. You have to bring all data. I will show you. For this, I will have to write inside this as cascade is equal to cascade type. In cascade type, again, if I just have to tell you, I have different things. So cascade type all, cascade type detach, cascade type merge, persist. So persist is cascade persist operation. Persist operation is nothing but whenever I try to save, you make sure the other table's details are saved. When I try to save a student data, sorry, when I try to save student information, also save student detail information. It is only when I perform persist. Tell me, when I am trying to fetch, do you want details from both the tables to be fetched? Yes or no? So for that, I will have to write here as, I don't have fetch, detach or refresh. So these are other things, merge operation, remove operation. So I will say I don't want all of this, simply say all. I want all of this. I don't want to say only for persist, only for merge. I don't want to say. Whenever I want to do any operation, you have to bring me both the rows both the tables detail. I hope you are able to understand this. So I will say one-to-one mapping cascade is equal to cascade type dot all. It is basically I want to deal with the data of one row, one student details present in both the tables. I hope you are able to understand this. Alright. So, okay sir, you have written this correct. How do you want to record it, sir? See here, see here. What did I say? I am saying, boss, whatever this ID I have, this ID you store it here so that in future I will use. See here. What is that I am saying? If I want to see, okay, what is the address of this particular user? What is that I am doing? I will have to go to that table. In that table, to which column should I, which row I should go? First row, how is that you are recording? You are recording it here. Which means there is some detail from that row which I am trying to join here. So it is called as a join column. It is called as a join column. Which is my join column here? SDID is my join column. Will you agree with me? So I will write here as join column is SDID. So I will say it @ join column and name is equals to SDID. I will write it as SDID. Is it clear? Oh, sorry. I will write it as join column name is equal to SDID. Any confusion till here? Hello? Sir, can I try to print or execute this code, sir? So before I execute this code, I will go to the main method. Tell me, student details I have? Yes or no? Do I have a student address? Student address I don't have, so I will create a student detail as Virat at gmail.com and phone number I will write it here as 18181818. Right? So this is the details I want to insert into the table, but along with Virat, don't you feel Virat's address also I want to store? Or Virat's details also I need to store. But where do I have Virat's details? Do I have it? I need to create it now, sir. Will you agree with me? So I will say here as create student details. Student details, SD I will say, is equal to new student details. New student details, I will import the student details class. Tell me, what all information do you want to pass into the student details? Sir, SDID is auto-generated. I need to pass area, city and pin code. So I will go to the main method. I will say it here as area is BTM, city is Bangalore and pin code is 560076. Right? So this is the information that I am now going to store. This is the information that I am now going to store. But tell me, you have two objects. One is student, the other one is student details. But how are you telling? Boss, this student's detail is this object, this address. You have created two objects. But is there any relation between both of them? Hello? No relation, sir. Will you agree with me? But if you go to the student class, what is that I have in the student class? See here. What is this student details that I have? Is it an object? It is one variable, sir. That's all. If I want, I can say for this student, this is the address. I can use this variable and set the address. But tell me, do I have a setter for student details? I don't have a setter or a getter, so I will create a setter or a getter now. So I'll right click, I'll say source, generate getters and setters. So you can see student details. I will generate a getter and a setter. So I will go to the main method. I will now tell, boss, student S1 has a student details called as SD. I hope you are able to understand this. For this, I will say S1 dot set student details as SD. Student S1 dot set student details as SD. I hope it is clear. Any confusion here? And now, what is that I am doing? I am beginning a transaction, persisting a student 1, then committing the transaction. So what is that I am expecting? If I run this program, in the table, student information should be inserted, student detail information also should be inserted, where there should also be an extra column which is saying, was this is the mapping row. Join column is what I am saying. Can I try to execute this to see if really data is mapped one to one? Hello? So before I execute, I will go to the database. I will show you the data or the columns here. So you can see September JEE. If I go to the tables, I have employee, student and student sequence. I will refresh and also show you. So I only have employee, student and student sequence. I did not create the student detail table. I just want you to see how Hibernate is going to create it on its own. So now I will go to my program and I will just save my code and I will try to execute my program. Once I execute, it says association targets the type com.hibernate.entity student details which do not belong to the same persistent unit. Okay. So it says here student details. I am targeting it to something that does not exist is what it says. Where is it? SDID. SDID, I have it. I'll make sure I'll write this also as SDID. Alright, sorry. Now, what is this? What is this error? Let me rerun. Let me see the error again. What does it say is you are trying to access some student details called as com.hibernate.entity.student details. What is this student details class? It is an entity class. If it is an entity class, don't you feel you need to mention about it? Did you mention? Where you have to mention? Either in mapping class I should write, or in my session. Before I create a session, add annotated class I need to write. Will you agree with me? Tell me, did I write that add annotated class? So you can see I'll go to the main method. In the main method, I'm only using it for the student class as the annotated class. Along with the student class, I will also say add annotated class. And what is my annotated class I need to mention? What is my annotated class? Student details dot class. I'll now have to import student details. I hope it is clear now. So can I try to execute this now? I will now just save this, and in case if I run my code, so it says data is inserted, but I want to see what are the various SQL queries that has got created. Can you see? Imagine if I have as a programmer had to write all these queries. I hope you are able to understand this, how simpler Hibernate is trying to make our life now. So tell me, what is it doing? First and foremost thing, it is altering a table called as a student. It is adding a column called as SDID. Why? Mapping a column, sir, SDID should be present. So it has created an SDID column. Then what is the next thing that it is doing? Create a stable student details with SDID, area, city, pin code. Primary key is SDID is what it says. Right? Then create table student details sequence. Because SDID is auto generated value. What should be the next value? It is going to fetch from this table. I hope you are able to understand this. Then insert into student sequence value as 1 because it is the first data is what it says. Then alter table student, drop index some value it has removed and all of it. Then alter table student unique SDID, add constraint, SDID has to be unique. Why? One student, one detail. One detail of a student will not be given to multiple students, which means it has to be unique throughout the student table. I hope you are able to understand this, right? Then alter table student, add constraints, foreign key, SDID it is making it as foreign key inside the student table. It is saying, boss, it is going to be fetched from the student detail table. Then select the next value for student, what should be the next index. Then update student sequence, it is setting the next value for the student. Then student details also it is fetching, and then it is running these two queries, insert into student details, insert into student, then it says data is insert. Now having seen all of this, by now we already understood in the database there should be multiple tables that will be created now. Yes, so you can see I will refresh this, and once if I refresh it, you can see I have a student details table in which student details is present, student details sequence table in which the next sequence value is present, then student table in which Virat is one student who is having an ID. See, it is an auto-generated value. You can, though it is not in a sequence, it is okay. But you need to understand it is a unique value and it is not what I have generated. So you can see Virat and his details are present, but there is one additional column called as SID. For Virat, the SID is 1. What does it mean, boss? This is one row in the another table. If you go to the student detail table, any table which is having the SID as 1 is the details about Virat. Is the details about Virat. I hope you are able to understand this. Yes. So whenever I try to insert information inside the student table, student detail table information also will be inserted. Whenever I try to insert details into the student table, student details table will also be inserted, and this is only called as one-to-one mapping. One row in one table is mapped with another row in another table. Now, what I want to do is, I have seen how to map or how to insert data. The next thing that I want to see is how to fetch data. How to fetch data? Can I try it? In order to try it, what I will do is, I'll just comment this information. I'll comment this code, whatever I had written. Tell me, how will I fetch details? How will I fetch details? Yes, please. How will I fetch details? I will call a method called as the get method, sir. If I am using the primary key, I need not write a HQL also. If I am not using a primary key, I need to write a HQL. Since I am not, I will be using the primary key, all I need to do is just call the get method. Will you agree with me? I will say session dot get. What do you want to get? I will say get it from student dot class. Get the information from student dot class whose ID is 2. Or maybe I will write it as whose ID is 52. What I want to get is, I want to get some information about the student. Will you agree with me? So can I try to get it? Okay, sir, when I write this code, what will I get? I will get one row of information from the table. What is this one row of information from the table equivalent to? It is an object. One row is an object. Multiple rows is a list. Right? One row is an object. What object is it? Student object. Yes, I will say. So I will say student yes is equal to session dot get student dot class ID is 52. Is that clear? And now in yes, what do I have? I have a student object. I will try to print the details about the student here. I will say system.out.println ID. ID I will append yes dot get SID. Yes or no? SID is the variable, get SID is the method. So in the same way, I will print name yes dot get name. In the same way, email yes dot get email. In the same way, mobile, and I will write here as yes dot get mobile. Is this clear? I am able to get the SID, name, email and mobile, and I will be able to print it. Can I try it? So who is the user with ID 52? Virat. So I need to bring the details of Virat. So I will run my code now, and you can see ID 52, name, everything you are able to bring. Clear? But I just want you to watch a little above. What is your Hibernate doing? Did it only bring ID, name, email, mobile number? What is it also doing? City, area, pin code, all that information also it is bringing, sir. Why is it bringing that information? Sir, one row in one table is mapped with one row in another table. When you try to fetch the details, Hibernate will fetch both the rows from both two different tables. I hope you are able to understand this. This is the actual meaning of one-to-one mapping. This is the actual meaning of one-to-one mapping. I hope you are able to understand this. Yes? Can I try to print them and see them? If it is there, then I should also be able to see them. So let me try to write here. See, okay, SDID is also there. So I will print it here as SDID as, how will I get SDID now? In a student class, what do I have? See here. I have student details variable. If I have to get SDID, it is present in student details reference. Will you agree with me? So I will have to say, boss, s dot SDID dot get SDID, sorry, student details dot, one second. It's not student details also directly I cannot access because it is a private variable. So for this I have get student details method. Are you able to understand this? In this get student details I will say dot get SDID. I will say dot get SDID. In the same way I will just copy this, one second. I will paste it here. In the same way I will paste it here and also here. So what are the information? SDID, area, city and pin code. So I will write here as get SDID, get area, get city and get pin code. I hope you are able to understand this. Hello? So if I now try to run my code, you can see all the information you have got. You have got all the information. Any confusion here? Hello? So two operations over, inserting, fetching. Now the next thing I want to do is I want to update. Maybe I want to update area. I want to update area. So what is that I need to do in order to update the area is something that I need to understand now. How are you doing the update operation with respect to your normal Hibernate CRUD? Normal Hibernate CRUD, how are you performing update? I was getting an object, setting the data, again save or again persist. That is what I was doing. Yes or no? The same thing I will do here also. Have a look at it. Have a look at it. So tell me, when I say student, yes, see, I'll comment all of this again. So I have a student, yes, will you agree with me? When I bring this student, you need to understand this is how I have brought that object of student. So assuming its address is 1000, S is a reference in which I have SID, name, email, mobile. Will you agree with me? Along with this, there is one more information as well, which is nothing but student details, which is a reference to an object. Student details is a reference to an object. I will say the address is 1001. See, logically talking, it will never be 1001 because so much of memory will be there. I am assuming it to be 1001. What is there inside that object now? Sir, I have SDID, area, city and pin code. What I want to do now is I want to change city. I want to change the details called as city. How will I set that a city is my question. If I need to set this city, don't you feel I need to access this object? Hello? If I have to access this object, how will I access it? There is a reference for it called as student details, sir. Student details, is it a public reference variable or is it private? If it is private, can I directly call student details? I need to call one getter called as get student details. Will you agree with me? Get student details, from where I will call? From student object. S dot get student details dot city I want to update is nothing but I want to set. Will you agree with me? So I will say here as boss, S is the student. From this students I want some information. What information? Student details. So I will say get student details. I have got student details. Into the student details, what do you want to do? I want to set some address, sir. So I'll say dot set area. What is the area that you want to set? Maybe I will say I want to set it as MG Road. I want to set it as MG Road. Okay, sir. Once you have set this, what is the next thing, sir? I want to persist this object now. Will you agree with me? So I will say save it. Then I will go to session dot begin transaction. Then I will say session dot persist student yes, and I will say session dot get transaction dot commit. I hope you are able to understand this. Now I will say system.out.println data set. Is it clear? Can I try to execute this program now? So if I now just save it and run my code, you can see what does it do. It is first selecting all the information. Once it has set all the information, it is updating student details, set some information to SID. Let me see if really data is updated. I'll go to my table. Previously the area was BTM. Now you can say I'll go to student again. So what is Virat's student detail ID? 1. So if I go to student detail table, in 1 area is set to MG. I hope you are able to understand this, right? Similarly, you will also run the delete command as well. Whatever you did in your regular Hibernate CRUD, the same thing you will do here for delete as well. Fetch the object, check if object is existing, then call the delete method. I hope it is clear. Hello? So one-to-one mapping, is it clear? Any confusion here? One thing I want you to understand is this is a one-to-one unidirectional mapping. Sir, what do you mean by unidirectional mapping? Tell me one thing, while I was fetching this student detail, will you agree with me? Student detail table information also I got. When I was getting the student information, student detail information also I got. Now, what I will do is I will change my code. What I will do is I will change my code. I just want you to observe here. I will comment all of this. only session is created. Once the session is created, I will say session dot get. What do you want to get, sir? I will say I want to get student details dot class. I want to get student details dot class. What should I get? Details of ID 1, SD ID 1, primary key SD ID 1. What will I get? I will collect it in SD. What is SD? I will call it as student details. So student details type SD is equal to session dot get student details. Now my question is, if I bring student details, will I also get student information? If I get student details, will I also get student information? No, sir. See, what is the output? I really don't bother. I will simply execute this code, and in the query only you will understand. Look at that information, what it is fetching. It is only saying select SDID, area, city, pin code. That's all from student table. Is it anywhere bringing name, email, mobile number? Why? Because only student table is mapped with the student detail. The reverse is not there. Student detail is not mapped with the student. Will you agree with me? It is called as unidirectional mapping that I have done, where student table is mapped with the student detail. If a student detail is also mapped with a student, it is called as bidirectional mapping. Unidirectional mapping and bidirectional mapping. So how to perform one-to-one bidirectional mapping is something that we will understand in tomorrow's session. Right? I hope it is clear. See, one thing I want you to understand is one-to-one bidirectional mapping. I will not use the same program. I will use a different example. Maybe I will say customer and customer detail. The only reason is if I rewrite the code, the more number of times you see me write the code, at least some variables and some annotations will sit in your mind. I hope you are able to understand this, because all I need to do is just 4 or 5 more lines. If I add bidirectional mapping also, will be over. Just 4 or 5 lines if I add, bidirectional mapping also will be over. Since Hibernate is very new for us and we are writing the code, I want to do every program from the scratch so that the entire setup you will remember. The way in which you have to set your environment you will remember. And also the annotations, the more you listen to them, the better understanding you will have about it. That's the whole reason. Right? Anyways, for now I'll halt my session here. I'll see you in tomorrow's session. Project we will have it. Right? Thank you so much.